deception, intrigue, and deadly conspiracies. Today we're going to explore who the most ruthless women in the Bible were, the terrible acts they committed, and the events that shaped their stories. Each of them left a trail of destruction and corruption, impacting the course of sacred history. If this type of content interests you, like and subscribe to the channel so that more people can learn about these impressive stories. Taking third place on our list of the most evil female figures in the Bible is Herodias. But before we detail her ruthless actions, it's essential to understand the tragic fate of John the Baptist. John was not just an ordinary preacher. He was a passionate, charismatic, and extremely influential prophet who walked the banks of the Jordan River proclaiming messages of repentance and transformation. His powerful speech drew crowds, captivating both the humble and those in power. Tensions intensified when John the Baptist dared to publicly condemn Herod Antipas' marriage to Herodias. Herod, ruler of Galilee and Perea, had divorced his legitimate wife to marry Herodias, who in turn had also broken off her marriage to Herod's brother Philip. This union not only defied moral precepts, but also went against the principles of Jewish law. John, unafraid of the consequences, denounced this illicit relationship, warning about the spiritual and social impacts of this choice. His courage, however, aroused the hatred of Herodias, who saw in him a threat that needed to be silenced once and for all. Despite Herodias' influence, Herod Antipas had a mixture of respect and fear for John the Baptist. Even though he was uncomfortable with his words, he saw John as a holy man and avoided harming him directly. However, political pressures and Herodias' growing dissatisfaction led him to order his arrest. John, imprisoned, became a symbol of resistance, a man unwavering in the face of injustice. But for Herodias, just having him in prison was not enough. She wanted him dead. The final turning point in the story occurs at a grand banquet hosted by Herod. Herodias, cunning and determined, devised a meticulous plan. She instructed her daughter, traditionally identified as Salome, to perform a mesmerizing dance to entertain the guests. Enchanted by the spectacle, Herod, in a moment of exaltation, promised to grant the young woman any wish. Under her mother's guidance, Salome asked for the head of John the Baptist on a platter. Bound by his own oath and fearing to lose credibility in front of his court, Herod gave in, sealing the prophet's fate. In our second position among the most feared female figures in the Bible is Athaliah. Her trajectory began at the heart of power in Judah as the daughter of the infamous couple Ahab and Jezebel. Thus, her legacy was already deeply intertwined with a period marked by political and spiritual crises. Her son, Ahaziah, assumed the throne, but his reign was short-lived. In a devastating coup, Jehu, commander of the Israelite army, orchestrated the execution of Ahaziah and also of Jehoram, king of Israel. With her son dead and no direct heirs of an age to rule, Athaliah saw the perfect opportunity to consolidate her influence. Determined to secure her rule, Athaliah made a ruthless decision. She would eliminate any descendant of the house of David who might threaten her reign. The Davidic line was more than a group of rulers. It symbolized God's promise of the coming Messiah. But for Athaliah, preserving her position was more important than respecting the sacred tradition. So she ordered the extermination of any potential contenders for the throne. The measure was brutal, resulting in a veritable massacre of members of the royal family. However, Athaliah's cruel plan encountered an unexpected obstacle. Jehoiada, the high priest, who managed to hide Joash, one of the last legitimate descendants of the Davidic line, kept secret within the temple. Joash was raised away from the eyes of the usurping queen. Years later, when he came of age, Jehoiada mobilized a movement to restore the legitimate monarchy. In a public and unexpected ceremony, Joash was crowned, provoking Athaliah's wrath. In desperation, she tore her clothes and cried out accusations of treason. But the people had already made their decision. They supported the restoration of David's rightful heir. Athaliah was captured and taken to the palace, where her bloodthirsty path came to an end. And finally, at the top of our list, we have the one who is often remembered as the most cruel woman in the Bible, Jezebel. Also called Jezebel, she was not just a queen, she was a true symbol of manipulation and idolatry. A Phoenician princess, she married King Ahab, sealing a strategic alliance between Israel and her homeland. However, Jezebel brought with her more than just political deals. She introduced the worship of Baal, a pagan god, and used her influence to spread this belief throughout the kingdom. Her impact was profound and destructive. Under her guidance, temples and altars dedicated to Baal were built, leading the people away from the traditional faith of Israel. But her wickedness did not stop at idolatry. Jezebel also waged relentless persecution against those who resisted her influence, including the execution of prophets of the Lord. One of the main targets of her wrath was Elijah, one of God's most notable prophets, who challenged her authority and denounced her evil deeds. Among her most cruel acts was a conspiracy against Naboth, a righteous man who owned a vineyard coveted by Ahab. When Naboth refused to sell it, Jezebel took matters into her own hands. She devised a sordid scheme, calling false witnesses to accuse him of blasphemy and treason. The plan worked. Naboth was condemned and brutally executed, allowing Ahab to take possession of the vineyard. This episode did not go unnoticed. The prophet Elijah confronted Ahab and Jezebel, proclaiming that divine justice would fall upon them. And, indeed, the prophecy was fulfilled. After Ahab's death, his son Jehu rose to power and took it upon himself to eradicate Jezebel's influence. The queen, true to her nature, tried to seduce him and manipulate the situation, but her fate was already sealed. In a moment of ruthless judgment, she was thrown from a window and her body was devoured by dogs, exactly as had been predicted. These biblical stories carry powerful messages that can be applied to our lives today. Here are some valuable lessons we can learn. Lesson 1. The consequences of unbridled ambition. Herodias, Athaliah, and Jezebel were women driven by unbridled ambition, willing to do anything to achieve and maintain power. However, they all met tragic ends. This teaches us that seeking power, status, or advantage at any cost can lead to destruction. True leadership and influence must be exercised with integrity and responsibility, not manipulation and cruelty. Second lesson, the danger of manipulation and pride. Jezebel manipulated Ahab to achieve her own goals. Herodias used her daughter to get the head of John the Baptist, and Athaliah imposed herself as queen, eliminating anyone who got in her way. These attitudes show how manipulation may seem advantageous in the short term, but always has negative consequences. Humility and honesty are fundamental qualities for healthy relationships and lasting success. Third lesson, the price of injustice. The story of Naboth reveals how Jezebel did not hesitate to commit injustice to satisfy her husband's whims. This teaches us that injustices can be committed by those in power, but justice always prevails. Good may seem weakened in the face of evil, but in due time, the truth comes to light, and those who practice evil reap what they sow. Lesson 4. The importance of standing true to your principles. John the Baptist could have remained silent in the face of Herod and Herodias' illicit marriage, but he chose to stand up for the truth, even though he knew it could cost him his life. His story inspires us to stand firm in our values, no matter the consequences. Integrity comes at a price, but it also brings respect and an unshakable legacy. Lesson 5. The power of justice and faith. Jehoiada risked everything to hide Joash and preserve the lineage of David, showing that faith and courage can change the course of history. Doing the right thing often requires sacrifice, but the reward is far greater than any momentary benefit of a wrong decision. Sixth lesson, what we sow, we reap. The three women we explored used power in destructive ways and reaped suffering and a tragic end. This is a universal lesson. What we do returns to us. If we sow good, we reap good fruits. If we cultivate evil, the harvest will be bitter. Conclusion. The Bible does not tell these stories just to recount the past, but to teach us eternal lessons about character, choices, and consequences. Each of us faces situations where we can act honestly or give into the temptation of deceit and ambition. The big question is, what mark do we want to leave on the world? If this type of reflection makes sense to you, comment here what most impacted you in these stories and share it with someone who can learn from these lessons too. These stories show us how abuse of power and corruption can lead to ruin, serving as eternal warnings. Which of these women do you consider the most evil? Comment below which city you are watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support our work. Until next time,